The city thrummed with life, a pulse of horns, footsteps, and voices weaving through the concrete canyons of downtown Chicago. Winter had crept in early, dusting the streets with a thin layer of frost that sparkled under the streetlights. On the terrace of a sleek cafe overlooking Michigan Avenue, time seemed to pause, a quiet bubble amid the urban rush. James Carter, 42, sat alone at a corner table, his black coffee cooling untouched, his eyes tracing the skyline through tinted aviators. He was a man who wore success effortlessly told overcoat, polished loafers, a presence that turned heads. But beneath the polished exterior, James was adrift, caught in a stillness that no amount of wealth could shake. He came here not for the coffee, but for the strange solace of a crowd's anonymity, a place where he could feel the world move while he remained untouched. His phone buzzed on the table, a sharp vibration against the glass. He ignored it. Then, a small voice cut through the haze, quivering but determined. "Please, sir, just $10. James blinked, lowering his gaze. A boy, no older than 5, stood before him, his threadbare jacket too thin for the biting cold, his sneakers scuffed and oversized. In one hand, he clutched a tattered cloth, the other was empty, curled into a small fist. "I'll shine your shoes," the boy said, his voice steady despite the tremble in his lips. "Just $10. It's for my mom. She needs food." James studied the boy, his expression unreadable. His loafers, gleaming from a morning polish, reflected the child's wide, desperate eyes. This could be a hustle, he thought, a city scam he'd seen before. Yet something in the boy's posture, proud, not pleading, held his attention. "Where's your mom?" James asked, his tone flat, testing. The boy hesitated, then pointed across the street. "Over there. She hasn't eaten since yesterday." James followed the gesture. At the corner, near a frost-dusted bus stop, a figure slumped against a brick wall. She was young, maybe mid-20s, her dark hair tangled, her coat frayed at the cuffs. One boot was missing, exposing a sock to the cold. She didn't move. The city's noise faded, cars, chatter, the wind itself. James looked back at the boy, still holding out his cloth, his small face set with a resolve that seemed too heavy for his years. There was no act here, no rehearsed lines, just a child who'd learned the world only listened when he worked for it. James pushed his coffee aside, cold now, and met the boy's gaze. Those eyes weren't just asking for money, they were asking to be seen. And for the first time in years, something stirred in James Carter, a flicker of feeling, raw and unwelcome, but impossible to ignore. James followed the boy across the street, his polished shoes clicking against the pavement. The boy moved fast, undeterred by the cold or his worn-out sneakers. Around them, Chicago buzzed taxis honked, shoppers laughed, baristas called out orders. No one noticed the woman crumbling at the edge of the sidewalk. She was young, her face half hidden by matted hair, her lips pale. James stopped, his breath catching. For a moment, he wasn't sure she was alive. "Mama," the boy whispered, dropping to her side. "I found someone." The woman didn't stir. Her knees were scraped, her skin ghostly. James stepped closer, cautious, his eyes scanning for the rise of her chest. There a faint movement. "Sarah," the boy murmured, stroking her arm. "Mama, wake up. He's gonna help." James crouched, his tailored coat brushing the dirty pavement. He'd spent the morning in a boardroom, trading million-dollar deals. This was different. He slipped off his coat and draped it over her. Her body was ice cold. A faint groan escaped her lips as she shifted, revealing sharp cheekbones and eyes sunken with exhaustion. "Who?" she rasped, barely audible. "It's okay," James said, his voice softer than he intended. "You need help. I've called a car." She tried to sit up, but her strength gave out, her head lolling back. "No, I don't." Her words trailed off as she collapsed again. James caught her, his arm steadying her frail frame. She weighed nothing. "You're going to a clinic," he said, firm but gentle. No arguments. The boy gripped his mother's hand, watching James with wide, unblinking eyes. "She didn't eat since Sunday," he said, his voice small but clear. A yellow cab screeched to a stop. James lifted the woman into his arms, her head resting against his shoulder. The boy scrambled in after them, clutching her hand. Northwestern Urgent Care, James told the driver. Fast, double the fare. The driver nodded, weaving into traffic. Inside, James held her upright, his coat wrapped tightly around her. She murmured something incoherent, her fingers still laced with her son's. The boy looked up at James. Are you a doctor? James managed a faint smile. No, but I know people who are. They'll help her. At the clinic, nurses were waiting, alerted by James's call. They wheeled out a stretcher, and James eased the woman onto it, keeping her steady as they draped a blanket over her. She's malnourished, he told the staff. Collapsed from hunger and cold. Check the boy too. He's 5. The boy trailed behind as they wheeled his mother inside, his small hand clutching the edge of her blanket. In the waiting area, James stayed close, one hand on the boy's shoulder. The child looked up, his voice barely a whisper. Will they fix her? James knelt to his level, meeting his gaze. They'll do everything they can. And so will I. A nurse at the desk watched, her eyes glistening. Outside, the city roared on, but for James Carter, the world had narrowed to this moment. This boy, this woman fighting to survive. The hospital room was stark, lit by a fluorescent hum. Sarah blinked slowly, her body heavy, as if waking from a dream she couldn't place. And the force dripped into her arm, and the thin blanket covered her legs. Through a glass window, she saw a waiting area, unfamiliar and cold. Panic surged. Sam, she gasped, trying to sit up. Dizziness hit hard, forcing her back. A calm voice stopped her. He's right outside. He's safe. Sarah turned, startled. A man sat near her bed, composed, hands clasped. He wore a simple sweater, no coat, but his presence carried a quiet authority. Who are you? She asked, her voice hoarse, eyes narrowing. Social services. Police. No, he said gently. I'm just a guy who saw your son offering to shine shoes for $10 to buy you food. The words hit like a punch. Sarah's lips parted, her mind racing to piece together the blur of the past hours. I followed him to you, he continued. You were unconscious. I got you here. That's all. She leaned back, wary, her fingers gripping the blanket. Why would you do that? Help us. He met her gaze, unflinching. Because I could. Sarah let out a bitter breath. People don't just help. Not in this city. I know, he said quietly. But your son looked at me like I was his last shot. Her eyes softened, drifting to the window. He's all I have, she whispered. The man stood. Would you like something to eat? Sam's had a sandwich, but I can get you something warm. No, she said sharply. No handouts. No money. This isn't charity, he replied, steady. It's a meal. You almost didn't wake up. Shame crept into her face, her voice dropping. We hadn't eaten in 2 days. I gave him everything I had. The monjar mess. She'd learned later didn't respond. The silence wasn't cold. It was patient, waiting. Then, in a quieter voice, she said, I was a social work major, top of my class at Loyola. I wanted to open a shelter for kids in crisis. I interned at one in college. I was going to change lives. James tilted his head, seeing the woman she described. What happened? Her lips trembled. I fell in love. He was charming, older, promised the world. When I got pregnant, he disappeared. No calls, no nothing. My parents, they didn't yell. They just looked at me like I'd ruined everything. Told me to leave. James listened, his face still. Shelters were full or unsafe, she went on. I took any job cleaning, waitressing. Some nights we slept in churches, some on CTA platforms. Sam curled up in my coat, but I told myself, one more day, one more dollar. If Sam was safe, it was enough. James's chest tightened. This woman, frail under hospital lights, had a strength that dwarfed any boardroom titan he'd known. I'm sorry, he said. She gave a tired smile. Don't be. You didn't put us here. No, he agreed. But I've walked past people like you for too long. Maybe it's time I stopped. The door creaked open, and Sam stepped in, a paper bag in his hands. His face lit up. "Mama, they gave me bread." He climbed onto the bed, wrapping his arms around her. Sarah flinched but pulled him close, kissing his hair. "You saved me some," she whispered. He nodded, pulling out half a roll. "The best piece." She took it, her hand shaking. A sob broke free, and she turned away, tears falling. James looked away, giving her space. Sam whispered, "Mama, it's okay. We're safe now." Sarah nodded, kissing his forehead, and in that moment, James saw it not weakness, but a love so fierce it redefined strength. The offer came quietly. James stood by the hospital window as Sarah packed a small bag of donated supplies. She looked stronger, though still pale. Sam spun in circles, humming. "I have a place," James said. "An empty guest apartment. You can stay until you're back on your feet." Sarah froze, her eyes sharp. "We'll manage. We always do." "I know," James said calmly. "But Sam deserves a warm bed while you figure things out. No strings." She hesitated, her resolve softening as she glanced at Sam. "A few days," she said. "Until I find work." James nodded. "As long as you need." The apartment was in a loop high-rise, modern and minimalist, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Michigan. Sarah paused at the threshold. "This is too much. We don't belong here." James set a key on the counter. "You do now." That night, in his own penthouse 2 floors up, James couldn't sleep. He stood by his window, the city glittering below, and memory surfaced. Her name was Emily, a painter, vibrant, with a laugh that filled rooms. They'd met at an art gallery, inseparable from that day. She'd asked for nothing but his time, but James had been chasing his empire. On the day he closed a deal that made him a fintech legend, Emily had been driving to surprise him with a gift, a watch engraved with "You're enough." She never arrived. A drunk driver ran a light, and she was gone. James had shut down after that, convinced he destroyed anything good. But Sarah and Sam were chipping away at that belief. Over the next weeks, he visited the guest apartment often, bringing groceries, books for Sam, or just to hear the boys' laughter. Sarah stayed guarded, insisting on cooking and cleaning herself. But slowly, they shared pieces of their lives over coffee, folding laundry, or when Sam slept. One evening, James found them laughing, Sam wrapped in a blanket like a cape, Sarah animating sock puppets in a silly story. Her face glowed, her smile unguarded. James watched from the doorway, unseen, and felt a warmth he hadn't known in years. He slipped out, but the image stayed, a crack in his armored heart. Sarah began to make the apartment a home. She cooked simple meals, kept the space spotless, and taped Sam's crayon drawings to the frigessence of a man in a suit, a woman, and a boy holding hands. James noticed the small things, Sarah's gentle touch when Sam slept, her calm explanations of life's hardships, her laughter, rare but radiant. He craved those moments, not just for her, but for the life they hinted at, real, unpolished, whole. One Saturday, James took them to Millennium Park. Sam raced to the Cloud Gate, giggling, while Sarah pulled her coat tight. James snapped photos. "Can I take one of you too?" he asked. Sarah smiled shyly. "Only if you're in it." They posed a James with Sam on his knee, Sarah beside them. Sam called it their family picture. Looking at it later, James felt a pang of belonging he hadn't known he could still feel. But tension simmered. One afternoon, James found his wallet on the counter, a $50 bill folded inside death, one he'd slipped into Sarah's bag, hoping she wouldn't notice. She'd returned it, silently asserting her dignity. James sat, the bill in his hand, awed by her pride. She didn't want saving. She wanted respect. That night, he gave her a book, a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, his mother's favorite. "Thought you'd like it," he said. Sarah thanked him, unaware of the note tucked inside until later. In his neat script, it read, "You deserve more than survival. You deserve to be seen, heard, loved." Sarah read it, her hands trembling, and for the first time, she let herself hope not just for Sam, but for herself. The storm hit without warning. One morning, James's assistant announced a visitor. Lauren Hayes, a college friend and investor, strode into his office, all sharp heels and sharper smiles. "Heard you've gone soft," she teased, perched on his desk. "Taking in a homeless woman and her kid. In your building." James's jaw tightened. "That's not your business." Lauren laughed. "What's the plan, James? Fix her to fix yourself. Ease at guilt you've carried since Emily." "Stop," he snapped, but it was too late. Sarah had come to drop off lunch, a thermos of soup with a note. "Thanks for everything." She'd heard it all from the doorway. The word shameless woman, guilt, fix yourself it deep. She left the soup on the reception desk and walked out. Back at the apartment, Sarah packed, her movements mechanical. She wrote a note. "Thank you for saving us, but I don't belong in your world." Sam clutched his stuffed dog, confused. "Are we leaving, Mama?" "Just for a bit, sweetheart," she said, her voice hollow. Rain began to fall as they left, a drizzle turning to a downpour. James returned hours later, eager to share a job affair, a role leading a community outreach program. But the apartment was silent. He saw the note, read it, and sank into a chair, the air leaving his lungs. Then he moved, grabbing his coat, sprinting into the storm. He searched frantic Alice-way stations, bus stops, the diner Sam loved. Rain soaked him, his breath ragged. Passers-by stared at the disheveled CEO, unrecognizable in his panic. At Lincoln Park, under a stone bridge, he found them, Sarah and Sam, huddled, soaked, a single bag at their feet. Sarah looked up, their eyes locking. Words failed him, but his plea didn't. "Please don't go," he whispered, rain streaming down his face. Rain pelted the bridge's underside, pooling on the concrete. Sarah sat curled around Sam, her jacket over him, her own body shivering. Her hair clung to her face, her fingers numb, but she held him tight, the weight of her choice crushing her. She'd left to protect them, to avoid being a burden. But it hurt. Footsteps splashed closer, and she tensed. James appeared, drenched, his eyes wild with relief. He dropped to his knees, just out of reach. Sarah stared, stunned. He looked broken, his coat sodden, his composure gone. He reached out, hand trembling. "You don't belong in my world," he said, voice cracking. "You are my world." The words shattered her defenses. She shook her head, tears mixing with rain. "James, you don't know what you're saying. You have a life, a future. I'm just..." "Don't," he cut in. "Don't say it. You walked into my life when I thought it was over. You showed me what love is, raw, selfless, fierce. You taught me family isn't wealth or status. It's sacrifice, stories, soup on a desk." Her breath hitched. "I'm not asking you to stay out of guilt," he said. "I'm begging because I can't imagine a day without you, without Sam's laugh, without your strength." Sarah looked at Sam, asleep, clutching her shirt, then at James, his eyes pleading. She let go, tears falling freely. She leaned forward, her forehead against his, her hand gripping his. In the city's chaos, they sat, two souls and a child, finding home in the storm. 6 months later, winter returned, but it felt different. In a renovated community center in Englewood, warmth radiated not just from heaters, but from purpose. Mothers and children filled the space, their laughter echoing. Sarah moved through the rooms, clipboard in hand, her dark hair in a neat braid, her presence steady and kind. She was the center's heart, turning James's funding into a haven for single mothers. James watched from the doorway, proud. He'd offered her the role. She'd made it her own. At 3 p.m., Sam burst in, backpack bouncing. "Mama." He hugged her, cheeks flushed. James followed, snow on his coat, and kissed her cheek. She smiled, taking his hand. That evening, their apartment lived in was alive with friends from the center. Sam showed off his latest drawing, a family under a rainbow. After dinner, James stood. "No speech," he said, voice thick. "But I've got something to say." He turned to Sarah, pulling out a velvet box. Inside was a simple ring, elegant, perfect. He knelt. "You begged for $10 once," he said. "Now let me spend my life building a home with you." Sarah's hand covered her mouth, tears brimming. She nodded. Sam cheered, Say yes, Mama. Yes, she laughed, tears falling. 1,000 times, yes, the room clapped, but James saw only her. Later, they walked through the snow, Sam between them, swinging their hands. They passed the cafe where it began, now a landmark of their story. Winter wasn't cold anymore. A boy's plea, a mother's sacrifice, and a man's redemption had woven a family from loss. What did you think of James, Sarah, and Sam's journey? Their story touches on love, sacrifice, and the harsh realities of poverty and injustice. Did James's actions redeem his past indifference? Or was he driven by guilt? Should Sarah have stayed or left when she did? Share your thoughts in the comments specially on how we confront violence and inequity in our world. Take a stand, voice your perspective, and let's spark a conversation.